COVID-19 has had a dire impact on the economic growth of African countries. Millions of people have lost their jobs, and the real GDP is estimated to have contracted by 2.1% in 2020. Our reporter Khayelihle Khumalo is in Nairobi, Kenya, to cover the African peer review mechanism. He's been finding out how African countries plan to revive their economies. He joins us now live. So, Kaya, let's talk overall about the dire situation in terms of economies in Africa. How's it looking?
Well, it's not quite a very rosy picture, Shahan. So it's been a very quite topical issue here in Nairobi, where the policymakers really are looking at the very resilient policies that they can come up with to try and cushion the impact, especially because has had very knock-on effects in terms of social expenditure as well, and just unintended consequences as well, in light of some restrictions that you have seen, where we've seen also certain industries being affected, tourism being one of them. So, for example, you do have a country like Kenya, where tourism is a bedrock of the economy of this country, among others, really, where we have seen quite dramatic decline, but also in South Africa as well. When you compare prior to COVID-19 in 2019 and looking at the numbers in 2020 all the way to 2021, you can see quite a very bleak picture really being painted. And also now a very big task for the policymakers now is about making sure that they establish these measures and mechanisms to try and deal with the problems that are emerging. But of course, now the main issue as well, Shahan, has to do with the vaccination in the continent. So they do say that it goes hand in hand, because if people are under-vaccinated, people are very hesitant to come through, for example, to push the foreign direct investment, among other key measures.
Of course, in terms of vaccine hoarding and the lack of vaccines in Africa, that's slowing down economic recovery, isn't it? We've been talking and hearing from leaders in Africa about how they need more vaccines on the continent, Kaya. But is that actually happening? Do we know if we're seeing more and more vaccines enter Africa so people can get vaccinated so that economies can restart or get the boost that they need?
Well, Shahan, it's still quite a very enormous challenge. I mean, for example, you do have the AU acquisition task team around the vaccine, with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa as a champion of COVID-19 vaccine for the continent. So by and large, I mean, you do have those countries where there's quite a massive amount of doses, but now you do have the challenge of inequality. Some countries still don't have doses, but also the global inequalities as well are having quite a very big impact. Shahan, you do have very quite clear information that out of the very 6 billion doses that have been administered, only 2% really has been used in Africa. So really just seeing the very sheer inequality that we still do have. So it is a major headache for policymakers who are really looking at what should be done to try to accelerate the pace, but also trying to tackle another issue, the elephant in the room being the issue around the vaccine hesitancy, where you do have vaccine, but people are still quite fearful to go and get the jab. So for the policymakers, it's all about trying to find the solutions that will address all these key problems.
Yeah. Kaya, very quickly, the African peer review mechanism, how does it make sure it's not another talk shop and that we actually see results from this meeting?
So, Shahan, it finds itself right in a very critical point, because it's all about ensuring that, there's good governance in the continent. We know that's a massive challenge. So it is a big issue for them to make sure that the resolutions that are taken are really fully implemented, as opposed to them just, gathering into somewhere, and not really seeing any just massive impact coming. So it is quite a very big challenge for them to make sure that implementation does become a name of the game.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Appreciate it. Khayelihle Khumalo is in Nairobi, Kenya.